Welcome back, awesome people of YouTube. In today's video, we will introduce you to Mr. Fantastic, also known as Reed Richards' extensive and complicated family tree. Born in California, an ambitious Reed Richards launched an exploration into space, not knowing he would come back genetically changed. Joining him on his journey were his then-girlfriend and future wife, Susan Storm, her brother Johnny Storm, and longtime friend Ben Grimm. Exposed to unique cosmic radiation in space, Reed Richards became Mr. Fantastic. Susan Storm turned into Invisible Woman. Johnny Storm transformed into the Human Torch, and Ben Grimm's became the Thing. Once the genetically altered bunch crash-landed on Earth, Reed realized they should team up to save the world from cataclysmic threats and formidable villains, thus forming Marvel's first family of superheroes. While saving the world, Mr. Fantastic often came face to face with members of his extended family, who either he didn't know about or had assumed villainous roles. Join us as we flip through the pages of the Richards clan's family album, and what better way to begin than with Mr. Fantastic himself. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Reed Richards. Reed Richards, also known as Mr. Fantastic, was the only son of affluent physicist Nathaniel Richards and his wife Evelyn. Reed turned out to be a child prodigy with extraordinary inclination towards science, who went to Caltech, Harvard, and MIT, and obtained 4 degrees in scientific disciplines when he was just 18. Reed Richards built a starship intended for interstellar travel, exhausting most of the $2 million his father had left him. When the government stopped funding the project, Reed decided to launch the Marvel 1 for a test run. In space, Marvel 1 went through some mysterious cosmic rays, which changed the course of the spaceship and the lives of those inside it forever, giving Reed, Susan, Ben, and Johnny new powers and abilities. Nothing is ever what it appears. It's the mysteries and the unknown that make life interesting. It is this quest for the unknown and mysterious that transformed the genius Reed Richards into his heavily altered Mr. Fantastic form. After the space accident, Reed Richards became this super stretchy being who could expand and contract at will, was capable of assuming any shape and size, and could also become super thin or super dense when required. His physical feats, however, exacted a toll on his body. Meanwhile, Reed Richards was already an inventor and scientific genius in nearly all fields of life, particularly excelling in quantum physics, aviation, robotics, and extraterrestrial studies. Supposedly the smartest man on Earth, Reed's most notable creation was the unstable molecule, which enabled the suits of the Fantastic Four crew to function in sync with their powers. Owing to Richards' intellectual genius and heroic deeds, he was an extremely revered figure in the superhero community, especially amongst other creative minds such as Tony Stark, T'Challa, and Bruce Banner. Under the guidance of Reed Richards, the Fantastic Four became the world's most celebrated group of superheroes. They delved into their first adventure against the Mole Man and went on to record innumerable ventures, fighting off Namor the Submariner, the alien Skrulls, the time-traveling pharaoh Rama-Tut, and the Molecule Man, among others. Mr. Fantastic led his team to save the world multiple times, particularly from science-based threats, and guided them successfully through daring expeditions such as journeying into the subatomic world or into the negative zone. The title of Reed Richards' greatest and longest-standing enemy goes to Victor Von Doom, whom Reed met in college for the first time. Victor Von Doom, who went on to become the Latverian tyrant and supervillain Dr. Doom, harbored hatred for Reed since the time an experiment went wrong in college, as a result of which Victor Von Doom's face got scarred for life. To exact revenge, Dr. Doom even went to the extent of transforming Reed into a monstrous being and making him attack Reed's most prized possession, his family. Even though the superhero community kept growing in the wake of the Fantastic Four's arrival, Mr. Fantastic battled every major crisis that threatened Marvel's Prime Universe, Earth 616. While leading the Fantastic Four, Mr. Fantastic also signed up for the Illuminati, a secret organization that worked behind the scenes to keep Earth safe. Due to his super intellect, Reed Richards sometimes would stray away from his heroic intentions, when his family and friends would guide him back to the right path. Nathaniel Richards, Reed's father. Nathaniel Richards' first comic book appearance was in 1984 in the 272nd edition of Fantastic Four. A genius scientist, Nathaniel inculcated the same penchant for science, exploration, and discovery in his son Reed before leaving his teenage son and joining the mysterious organization Brotherhood of the Shield, which essentially protected humanity from disastrous threats. For his first mission, Nathaniel teamed up with Iron Man's dad, Howard Stark, to track down the renowned inventor Nikola Tesla and retrieve Sir Isaac Newton's superhuman son, Leonid. Tesla's core was damaged in the clash that ensued, prompting Nathaniel to try and fix it. In doing so, Nathaniel exposed himself to the core's quantum energy, which accidentally gave him superhuman longevity and the power of time traveling, throwing him some 600,000 years ahead in time. Owing to his new powers, Nathaniel was able to go back to the past, only to find that the Brotherhood of the Shield had fallen. Because of the time-traveling mishap, all the other versions of Nathaniel Richards from alternate realities were also forced to land up in the same future, all similarly empowered. This gathering of all the Nathaniels was detected by a villainous version of Nathaniel named Immortus, who was responsible for keeping track of time for the Time Variance Authority. The sadistic Immortus asked the many Nathaniels to kill each other so that only one remains, forcing the original Nathaniel Richards to visit his teenage son for a brief while to ensure a safe future for him. To escape Immortus's evil plan, Nathaniel was hiding out on Earth 6311, which was in a desolate state. With his scientific genius and knowledge of technology, Nathaniel restored the Earth 6311's civilization. In return, the grateful queen got her eldest daughter Cassandra married to him. Over time, Cassandra began keeping Nathaniel lulled at his citadel and started impersonating him to misuse his technology for power. Under the guise of Nathaniel's armor, Cassandra became a ruthless tyrant named Warlord, who was eventually killed by the Fantastic Four members, who time-traveled to Earth 6311 looking for Reed's father. Years later, Nathaniel returned to the past to warn the Fantastic Four of a future in which Sentinels take over Earth and murder the mutant population. Nathaniel's real intention was to remove his grandson Franklin from the present timeline, so that Franklin and Rachel Summers do not have the child who would grow up to be the super-powerful mutant villain Hyperstorm. Sometime later, Nathaniel also trained Susan Storm in sharpening her powers, aided the Fantastic Four in defeating Aaron the Rogue Watcher, the Kree Army, and the Mad Celestials. Nathaniel helped Reed to empower the young superhuman group Future Foundation with the knowledge and technology he had gathered over time. Anticipating death, Nathaniel recorded a message for Reed on an artifact named the Prize, revealing the existence of Reed's half-sister. Evelyn Richards, Reed's mother. Let's go back in time a little and meet Reed Richards' mother. After Nathaniel Richards became a reputed name in the scientific community and his success grew, he fell in love with Evelyn, who too was a scientist. Nathaniel and Evelyn got married, lived in California's Central City, and had Reed. Unfortunately, Evelyn died when Reed was just 7, who grew up under the care of his time-traveling father. Evelyn had very little comic book presence, appearing just a few times in flashback. Susan Storm, Reed's wife. Susan Storm, who married Reed Richards in 1963's Fantastic Four Annual Issue 3, was the heart and soul of the superhero group. In the initial comics, Susan was portrayed as a doting girlfriend who played a less active role, but she eventually evolved to become perhaps the most competent of the Fantastic Four members, with truly fantastic powers. After the cosmic rays changed her genes, Susan gained the power of becoming completely invisible, hence adopting the name Invisible Girl. She could also turn other objects invisible, manipulate powerful force fields, and generate psionic blasts. Through the course of her comic book journey, Susan learned to sharpen and master her powers to the point that she could render someone temporarily blind by turning their optic nerves invisible, or project force fields on blood vessels to restrict organs, or shut out the sun for days at a stretch to engulf a planet in darkness. When the Psycho Man manipulated an emotionally unstable Susan following a series of family troubles, Susan became the villainous Malice. Even after the Psycho Man's influence was reversed, Susan believed the little girl inside of her was permanently replaced by a part of Malice, thus becoming the Invisible Woman. For a long time, I've tried to go on as if we're still the same people we used to be, as if I was still the same, but I'm not. Not after all that has happened to us. Not after what the Psycho Man did to me. There is no Invisible Girl anymore, Reed. She died when the Psycho Man twisted her soul. From now on, I am the Invisible Woman. Susan's role as a mother was a tragic one. When a nihilist triggered her son Franklin's mutant powers, Reed had to inhibit his brain functions in order to save the world, prompting Sue to detest her husband and leave with her son. Following her second pregnancy, Susan gave birth to a stillborn daughter, who was later revealed to have grown up in an alternate reality as Valeria Von Doom. When Reed Richards appeared to be murdered by Victor Von Doom, Susan took on the role of the Fantastic Four's leader, also tracking down her husband eventually. Upon Reed Richards' return, he questioned his capability as a leader, witnessing Susan's newfound confidence. Invisible Woman is one of the most celebrated female superheroes of Marvel Comics, owing to her incredible powers and complex story arc. As a founding member of the Fantastic Four, she was the matriarchal figure to her impulsive brother Johnny Storm, the supportive force behind Reed Richards, and also a close ally of her friend Ben Grimm. Franklin Richards, son of Reed and Susan. I was the impossible boy who could dream the future. I was a god. That's Franklin Benjamin Richards for you. Franklin, the son of Mr. Fantastic and Invisible Woman, was first introduced in 1968 and had recurring appearances in the Fantastic Four comics. He was born with mighty powers, which began manifesting at a young age. As a child, Franklin was under the care of sorceress Agatha Harkness, with whom he developed a familial rapport. Without his parents knowing, Franklin was part of the preteen superhero team Power Pack as Tattletale, and even traveled to space and back during his tenure. Franklin was a powerful master of reality warping and could view alternate futures in his dreams. Because of his mutant-like powers, Franklin was the victim of several abductions and threats, the earliest one being from a nihilist, who used a machine to release Franklin's full powers when he was still young. To save the world from Franklin's full potential, Reed Richards shut down his mind. During his face-off against Ultron 7, Franklin exhausted much of his energies, seemingly returning to his normal power level. During the Incursion Crisis, Franklin helped his dad rebuild the multiverse, which also drained much of his powers. When the Fantastic Four clashed with the alien villain Cormorant, Franklin depleted all his remaining powers, prompting Charles Xavier to telepathically reach out to him with the revelation that Franklin's mutant abilities were a result of his powers subconsciously altering his anatomy to make it seem like he had the X gene. Left with no powers, Franklin was no longer a mutant. Franklin was also kidnapped by his grandfather Nathaniel and taken to the future to be trained as a warrior named Psylord. When Reed Richards was held captive by Hyperstorm, Franklin established the alternate superhero team Fantastic Force to carry on his dad's goal of protecting humanity. Despite his young age, Franklin had time and again been instrumental in saving the lives of his famous family members, from the formidable likes of Mephisto, Norman Osborn, Onslaught, Nicholas Scratch, and others. Franklin also played an important role in how his sister Valeria came into being. During the reality warping battle with the malignant cosmic being Abraxas, Franklin revealed he had saved Susan's stillborn daughter many years ago with his powers, who was raised in an alternate timeline. Valeria Richards, daughter of Reed and Susan. This brings us to Franklin's sister, Valeria Richards, Mr. Fantastic and Invisible Woman's second child. With her first appearance in Fantastic Four Volume 3 in 2002, Valeria was introduced as the stillborn child of the superhero couple, who was saved by Franklin and raised in an alternate universe by Victor Von Doom, also known as Dr. Doom. After Franklin's powers were depleted during the Incursion Crisis, Valeria was restored in her mother, Susan Richards' womb, ready to be born again. When complications arose during her birth, Susan's brother Johnny Storm, also known as the Human Torch, reached out to Dr. Doom for assistance, who saved both the mother and the baby with a combination of mystical powers and science. As the child's godfather, Dr. Doom named her Valeria and also secretly cast a spell to make her his medium for his cunning use of magic. Reed Richards managed to break Dr. Doom's influence on Valeria and vowed to keep both his children, Valeria and Franklin, safe. Valeria Richards was remarkably intelligent, even as a baby, and could solve a Rubik's Cube as a toddler. She surpassed her father's genius in just a few years, eventually working with him to save the world. She also once struck a deal with a brain-damaged Dr. Doom, offering him to restore his intelligence in exchange for saving Reed Richards' life. During the Incursion Crisis, when the multiverse was on the verge of collapse, Valeria helped her father create the Life Raft to save the remaining human populace. She was inducted into the Future Foundation, a group of gifted youngsters by her father, who helped prevent the multiverse from collapsing. Valeria, who eventually came to be known as Brainstorm, proclaimed herself as the world's smartest girl and made it to several lists of Marvel's smartest female characters. Valeria Von Doom, Dr. Doom's adoptive daughter. The infant version of Valeria, who is sent to another reality by her brother Franklin, was brought up by Dr. Doom and that reality's invisible woman to become Valeria Von Doom. Valeria's tumultuous early years included being abducted by the Impossible Man and Woman and growing up under the care of the Inhumans as her babysitters on the moon. Like her brother, Valeria too started manifesting reality warping powers and psionic abilities, in addition to the intellectual prowess of her biological father, Reed Richards. This prompted Dr. Doom to fashion armor for her protection, with Valeria becoming Marvel Girl, who could transform into an armored self at will. When she was just 12, Marvel Girl was officially declared Dr. Doom's heiress in the throne room located inside the Baxter Building. Like her mother, Valeria possessed the power of invisibility by obscuring all kinds of radiation like kinetic energy, heat, and bioelectrical signatures. She could project powerful force fields and time dance like her stepbrother Sparky. Time dancing enabled her to teleport herself and others through time. Marvel Girl could resist Franklin's reality warping powers and was able to send the She-Hulk flying with a single punch. Marvel Girl often rode a flying board that answered to her instruction. Marvel Girl returned to the reality she was removed from, that is Earth 616, during one of her time dancing escapades and became an ally of the Fantastic Four. When the warrior woman Bacchae, working for the Amazonian Hippolyta, wanted to take revenge on the Fantastic Four, Marvel Girl interfered and battled the combined forces of Tartarus and also confronted the Olympian god Pluto to let the Fantastic Four be. When Susan Richards was unable to accept Valeria as her daughter, Marvel Girl recklessly engaged in an encounter with the She-Hulk, Titania, and Absorbing Man. Seeing Marvel Girl in danger, Susan intervened and delivered painful fates to the opponents, thus embracing Valeria as her daughter. During the reality warping battle with Abraxas, who targeted Valeria as an anomaly, Valeria joined forces with Franklin to resurrect Galactus, the only one who could one-up Abraxas. By the time the tampered reality was restored with Galactus's help, Franklin lost all his powers, which reversed Valeria's fate to being a baby in her mother's womb. Kang the Conqueror, incarnation of Nathaniel Richards. Now, let's shift our attention to the many versions of Nathaniel Richards. Marvel Comics has introduced innumerable incarnations of Nathaniel, one of them being Kang the Conqueror. In his expansive Marvel Comics history, Kang too had several origin stories, some of them mentioning him as a namesake descendant of the OG Nathaniel Richards, and some of them as a descendant of Latverian tyrant Dr. Doom. When Earth 6311 or Other Earth was desolate and barren, following centuries of warfare and technological advancements, the time-traveling Nathaniel Richards, the father of Mr. Fantastic, arrived on Other Earth and helped the planet to bring back civilization. He thus came to be known as the Benefactor, who saved Other Earth. Some 1900 years later, Kang was born as Nathaniel Richards in the 30th century of Other Earth, who became a robotics student, fascinated with history and discovery. Nathaniel busied himself with studies of the heroic age of Earth 616, which were brought to Other Earth by his ancestor, Nathaniel Richards. When he was 25, he discovered his ancestor's time machine and traveled back in time to Earth 616. He landed up in Egypt and ruled as Pharaoh Rama-Tut till the time-traveling Fantastic Four forced him out. As he attempted to flee the reality, a time storm forced him to land up in a modern era on Earth 616, where he encountered Dr. Doom and assumed an identity similar to him. Attempting to escape this reality once again, Rama-Tut was thrown into a war-torn 40th century. There, barbarians fought with technologies of the past, which they did not know how to operate. Rama-Tut, with his knowledge of the technology, easily conquered empires after empires, thus becoming Kang the Conqueror. He became an expert time traveler, a powerful manipulator of time, and mastered his future's advanced technology. Kang's conquests were not restricted to just Earth, as he aimed for various galaxies. But Kang remained obsessed with the modern-age heroes of Earth 616 and attempted to conquer that reality as well. Kang's relentless attempts to conquer the modern age resulted from his desire to seek out the celestial Madonna, who was prophesied to give birth to the most powerful being in history. Kang, wanting to be the father of the child, arrived at the Avengers Mansion when Mantis was revealed to be the celestial Madonna. Kang's plans were thwarted by a future version of Kang, who had grown wary of conquests. Through his time travels, Kang has many a time proved to be a menace to the Avengers and the Fantastic Four. In his constant attempts to erase the future or undo past deeds, Kang created multiple versions of himself, such as Baby Kang, Immortus, Scarlet Centurion, Iron Lad, Rama-Tut, Victor Timely, and the Council of Kangs. Immortus, incarnation of Nathaniel Richards. As we mentioned before, far along into the future, Kang had grown tired of his conquests and returned to the past as Rama-Tut, who then again made it to the present to aid the Avengers in saving Celestial Madonna. This Kang, or Rama-Tut, or Nathaniel Richards, was 77 years of age by then and wanted to stop aging to avoid death. In his attempt to achieve immortality, Nathaniel began researching the realm of Limbo and found it to be a timeless place where he could live on forever. Thus, he broke out from the time stream and stepped into Limbo to study time and observe alternate realities. The timekeepers in Limbo tutored their new apprentice on the secrets of time and gave him the responsibility of watching over 7 millennia, from 3000 BC to 4000 AD. The timekeepers tasked him with managing the temporal complications that his past selves had created, while personally, Immortus wanted to ensure that his past versions followed the true course of destiny so that he would end up being the guardian of time. Immortus was also to chart the course of history in such a way that it would end with the timekeepers being at the end of time. With his ability to hold the Forever Crystal, Immortus had complete control of the Limbo. He could alter the course of events and obliterate entire timelines. Immortus deployed the Space Phantoms, who are stranded beings who have lost their identities in the Limbo, as his servants, using them to intervene or redirect the time stream when required. For example, Rama-Tut landing up in the war-torn 40th century was a future Immortus's doing, and so was seizing control of the Scarlet Witch's probability-altering powers to change all the time that was under his custodianship. Immortus, who rarely engaged in personal combat, had his greatest weapon in his creation, Tempest. An extremely powerful crystalline warrior, Tempest wielded a club which could make one relive miserable memories and even age them. Immortus also had robot warriors he created in his Rama-Tut identity as his minions, as well as the shape-shifting aliens Dire Wraiths. Rama-Tut, another alias of Nathaniel Richards. Now, let's see how Nathaniel Richards of Earth 6311 transformed into the pharaoh Rama-Tut. Given Nathaniel's unquenchable thirst for adventure and conquest like his ancestor, when Nathaniel time-traveled to Earth 616 for the first time, he fashioned his time machine into a sphinx and charted a course for Egypt. After he crash-landed in Egypt, the weird and wondrous man, who was broken and blind, was nursed back to health by Baal, leader of the savage Sandstormers, in the hope of a future alliance. Nathaniel was named by Baal as Rama-Tut, which in his language translated to the visitor from beyond the sun. Once recovered, Rama-Tut left the Sandstormers for the land of the pharaohs, enslaving many natives along the way using his army of robots and technology from his time machine. But what got left behind was the Eye of Ages, which showed the future and contained a prophecy about the arrival of En-Saba-Nur, also known as Apocalypse, the world's first ever mutant. Usurping the throne of the present pharaoh, Amenhotep, Rama-Tut established himself as a godlike entity and transformed Amenhotep into a vampirish being. Rama-Tut forced the people of Egypt to worship him instead of the old gods, and built gigantic statues in his honor, irking the wrath of moon god Khonshu. Rama-Tut eventually returned to the Sandstormers, looking for the key piece of his time machine, the Eye of Ages. But despite Rama-Tut's torturous pursuits, Baal refused to look for it for Rama-Tut, eventually finding it during the arrival of a young En-Saba-Nur, who was brought up by Baal as his own son for the next 20 years. Meanwhile, Rama-Tut continued to rule Egypt unopposed as a ruthless tyrant. Rama-Tut clashed with the Avengers from Earth 616 when they traveled in a time machine that could only take them back in time, and hoped to return to their original time with Rama-Tut's technology. Rama-Tut also encountered the Fantastic Four when they traveled to the past looking for the herb that revived Rama-Tut's eyesight. Rama-Tut's most powerful weapon was the ultra-diode ray gun, which sucked out its opponent's wills, enslaving them in turn, and could also potentially kill enemies by compressing their brains. His time machine came equipped with technology like stun blasters, lasers, force fields, and robot armies. In time, Rama-Tut grew weary of his destructive reign in Egypt and intended to return to his original era, Earth 6311, not once, but twice. Both times he was caught up in time storms, which landed him in unexpected timelines. He then put himself in suspended animation inside a pyramid, so that 5,000 years later, he would wake up and help prevent his past self from taking the celestial Madonna as his bride. Scarlet Centurion, another incarnation of Nathaniel Richards. This brings us to Nathaniel Richards' time as the Scarlet Centurion. The first time Rama-Tut attempted to return to his native era, a time storm took him to the reality of Earth 616 and caused him to orbit around Jupiter in his time machine. There he met Dr. Doom, who had been ousted from Earth by the Fantastic Four. In the hope that Rama-Tut and Dr. Doom could be the same entity in different timelines, he reinvented himself with the appearance of Dr. Doom, and thus became the Scarlet Centurion. With the intention of conquering the modern-age superheroes, Scarlet Centurion went back in time during the early Avengers era and created a divergent reality, Earth 689. In that reality, he converted the Avengers into pawns by sapping out their wills with his ultra-diode ray gun. He made the Avengers believe that the superhumans would lead to the world's destruction in the future, and hence convinced them to take down every superhero in their reality. Scarlet Centurion also targeted the Avengers of Earth 616 with his brainwashed minions, but suffered a brutal defeat when the Avengers reactivated Dr. Doom's time platform and forced Scarlet Centurion back into the time stream. Nathaniel Richards' run as Scarlet Centurion was somewhat of a failure, following which he resumed his Rama-Tut guise again and wanted to return to Egypt for another reign. But owing to yet another time storm, he landed up in a future Egypt, which marked the beginning of his Kang the Conqueror persona. Tara Richards, Huntara, Nathaniel and Cassandra's daughter. Remember Nathaniel Richards' wife, Cassandra, from Earth 6311? The couple had 2 kids, son Arthur Richards and daughter Tara Richards. After Arthur was born, while Nathaniel remained preoccupied with his son, Cassandra carried out her tyrannical plans outside the Citadel as the Warlord. When the Fantastic Four came looking for Nathaniel from the future, Cassandra's evil plots were exposed, resulting in Nathaniel couple raising their infant son alone. Several years later, Arthur Richards and Reed Richards met in Warlord Cargill's timeline Elsewhen, where Arthur appeared as the cyborg War Marshal. Meanwhile, when Nathaniel left Earth 6311, his daughter Tara Richards became the guardian of her time stream. Tara was trained as a warrior and in psionic arts by Warlord Cargill and became Huntara, who had the psionic ability to manifest a scythe at will and could also teleport. With her weapon, Huntara could cause teleportation rifts and psionically attack her opponents. On Earth 616, Huntara joined the fearsome foursome, led by the villainous Claw, and attacked the Fantastic Four. Tara Richards hated her father Nathaniel, as she was made to believe that Nathaniel abandoned the protection of her timeline, dumping the responsibility on her. But when Psylord, Huntara's nephew Franklin Richards from Earth 6311, challenged Cargill about this claim, Huntara saw through Cargill's lies and sided with Franklin. After the Fantastic Four were disbanded, Huntara and Psylord founded the Fantastic Force and battled opponents such as Morgan Le Fay, the Inhuman Genetic Council, and Vanguard. Huntara also saved Susan Storm from dying by teleporting into the Negative Zone's explosive area. Hyperstorm, Jonathan Richards, Franklin Richards' son. Meanwhile, on Earth 967, Hyperstorm, also known as Jonathan Richards, was wreaking havoc. This is the guy Nathaniel Richards was trying to warn the Fantastic Four about when he kidnapped his grandson Franklin and took him to the future in order to prevent Hyperstorm from being born. Here's the story. In an alternate future, Franklin Richards got married to Rachel Summers, the daughter of Phoenix and Cyclops of X-Men. Franklin and Rachel had a son named Jonathan, who, owing to his mutant parents, came gifted with the supreme power, which is the ability to control the four fundamental forces of the universe that come from hyperspace. He was also capable of teleportation, invisibility, telepathy, telekinesis, mind control, psionic blasts. The list is pretty much endless. Calling him Hyperstorm, Jonathan Richards became a ruthless tyrant to the people of his world. Because of his future timeline, Hyperstorm had heard all about the Fantastic Four and intended to trouble the superheroes in the past, who had not heard of him yet. Hyperstorm sent the Tomorrow Man to attack the Fantastic Four in the past, and exiled Reed Richards into a timeline without any technology. When the Fantastic Four traced Hyperstorm to his alternate future, and even managed to free Reed Richards, Hyperstorm sent them to their original timeline feeling smug, believing that the Fantastic Four would fear him forever. However, Hyperstorm met his end when he battled the cosmic being Galactus and was dragged into a dimensional void with him. Joanna Jeffers, Reed Richards' half-sister. Meanwhile, it was only last year that Reed Richards met his mysterious long-lost half-sister, Professor Joanna Jeffers, in Fantastic Four Volume 6, Issue 46. Joanna Jeffers is a world-famous marine biologist and eco-warrior, whom Reed Richards has been a huge fan of, without knowing that he was related to her. Joanna, who has known about Reed all her life, despised her half-brother, as well as their father, for abandoning her. When asked to be a member of the Richards family by Reed, Joanna declined the invitation and offered this explanation. "You are Dad's favorite. He left me and my mother behind too. But you know where he went after that? Back to you. It's your life that Nathaniel Richards keeps popping back into. You are the one who has sent his last message. When Pop leaves anyone else, he stays away, but not Reed Richards." However, Joanna comes to realize that Nathaniel Richards' whimsical nature was not Reed's fault, and eventually reconciles with her half-brother. Marvelous verdict. The Richards family clan has expanded over the years through the introduction of new characters and the many incarnations of Nathaniel Richards. In an overarching sense, Reed Richards has been the central point, around whom new family members have cropped up time and again. In all of this, one thing remains certain, that Reed Richards and Susan Storm, with their super genius daughter Valeria and their reality-bending son Franklin, are undoubtedly one of the most power-packed superhero families in Marvel Comics. Who is your favorite character from the Richards family clan? Tell us in the comments below. And if you liked our video, please give us a shout out and watch this space for more marvelous content.